First, my name is Brian Kirath. I'm with KDOT. I am the KDOT project manager for this project. With me, I have Chris Norton, who is in charge of the IKE program, which this project has been advanced under. I wanted to say thanks for giving us the opportunity to present this to you guys. A big part of this SEIS is public involvement and reaching out and informing the community, and that is what we are trying to do here and keep you guys informed of the process and where we're at. So, you know, as part of this process, we have to go through alternatives and reasonable alternatives. And at this stage, we've knocked out the reasonable alternatives and we're in our selection process of our preferred alternative. And that's kind of what we're going to walk you guys through today, is how we went through that and selected our option. And then we're going to walk you through some of the interim safety improvements that are out there right now that you're seeing, and, you know, kind of give you some updates on those and the timelines for them. And then we wanted to talk some about some of the public feedback we've gotten and some of the, you know, with COVID-19, some of the, how we've had to change our processes and doing things virtually. I think we're going to walk you kind of through how some of that's gone for us and the next steps as we move on past here. So we'll move on to Kyle now.
Okay. Thanks, Brian. As Brian mentioned and Robin mentioned, we're nearing the completion of the federally required NEPA process for the SLT Westlake project. And part of that is analyzing, documenting, and disclosing what the potential environmental impacts of the proposed project are. As you can see on your screen right now, we have a very simplified process that we're going through, what you see there is a very simplified graphic of the process we're going through to evaluate the proposed transportation improvements, or what we call in legalese the alternatives. So as you can see, the first three squares up there, the initial alternatives, the alignment and engineering refinements, and the reasonable alternatives, that's where we've been in this project. So it's been quite a while that we've been working on this, probably well over 2 years that it's taken us just to get through those three squares there. But just to remind everybody here that the three reasonable alternatives that we've been dealing with, that we've screened down to, are what we call a no-build alternative, which is not building anything but maintaining the corridor reasonably for safety and making sure that it's operable. The second reasonable alternative we've been dealing with is a tolled expressway, and the third is a non-tolled freeway. So what we've done is we've taken those three reasonable alternatives and have evaluated them against a very large set of criteria. First of all, the first set being the purpose and need criteria. Basically, do these alternatives satisfy the rationale for doing this project? The second set is engineering criteria, making sure that what we're looking at is reasonable and feasible and, frankly, buildable. And the third set are environmental criteria. Basically, are there any environmental red flags that we're seeing with these alternatives? Now, of course, when we're evaluating those reasonable alternatives to get to an identified preferred alternative, we're using quantifiable data as much as possible. But again, not everything is necessarily quantifiable, so there is some subjective evaluation in there as well. So where we are right now, or what we're going to be talking about today, is we've gone through a pretty significant engineering refinement process. And we've looked at very specific pieces of the corridor, such as the north interchange with I-70. And after further development, we have screened these reasonable alternatives down, like I mentioned, to one identified preferred alternative. And that's what we're going to be talking to you today. So as you can see the star on the screen here, we are here. That's where we are with this process. And with that, I will turn it over to Craig to really dive into what we've been doing here in detail.
Thanks, Kyle. This is Greg. So what I'd like to do first is to take you through just a high-level summary of the alternatives that we looked at up at the K10 and I-70 interchange. those three alternatives that we evaluated, and then give you the highlights of our screening process related to determining of the initial preferred alternative for the corridor itself. As Kyle mentioned, the three reasonable alternatives that we considered were the no-build, the tolled expressway, and the non-tolled freeway. And what I'll do is focus on the items that differentiated the alternatives in our analysis. Please, as I go through this, if you have any questions, don't hesitate, as Robin indicated, to send out a chat. When we get to the end of the discussion about the interchange up at K10 I-70, we'll pause for any questions you might have before I move into a review of the corridor itself. So as you can see here, these are the three alternatives that we considered up at K10 and I-70 in the interchange configuration up there. These alternatives are listed here. Alternatives 1 and 2 utilize a combination of the interchange site at K10 and I-70 and a new interchange at Lecompton Road, whereas alternative 3 provides all access at a single interchange site at K10 and I-70. And it should be noted here that all three of these would work with both the non-tolled and the tolled alternative. So let me first orient you to this slide here, which is our alternative 1. Towards the top, you can see I-70, the Kansas Turnpike, running from left to right. K10 SLT, the yellow, running north to south here. The Farmers Turnpike, or North 1800 Road, just north of I-70. US 40, you can see over here from Lecompton Road, that starts at 1029 and proceeds easterly over towards K10 and 6th Street. And then, as I mentioned, Lecompton Road up here in the upper left-hand corner. So as I indicated, the yellow, the improvements that are part of alternative 1 are illustrated in yellow on this map, as well as the two that we'll get into here in a little bit as well, the other alternatives. So with alternative 1, the new interchange at K10 and I-70 is an interchange that would provide access to, from I-70 and K10 only. There would not be access provided between SLT and the Farmers Turnpike, or between I-70 and Farmers Turnpike at this location. Access to the Farmers Turnpike is provided at the new Diamond interchange that you can see at Lecompton Road and I-70, about 2.5 miles to the west. Because access between SLT and Farmers Turnpike is rerouted along I-70 via the new interchange at Lecompton, it's also anticipated that this alternative would shift some of the traffic to US 40. And therefore, as part of alternative 1, where anybody on Farmers Turnpike or Lecompton Road, to get access to K10, could either do it through I-70, which would require a toll, or using US 40, and continuing down 1029 and then over to 6th Street. So that would be the alternative routing for Farmers Turnpike and Lecompton Road to get over to K10 via I-70 or US 40. As a result of that, with alternative 1, we considered improvements along US 40 to improve safety that could include shoulder widening along the corridor all the way from Lecompton Road over to 6th Street, as well as intersection improvements at some of the significant critical intersections along the corridor. Alternative 2. Next slide. This is alternative 2, which again provides a new reconfigured interchange at K10 and I-70. This system interchange would provide access to and from I-70 and K10, as well as access to and from K10 and Farmers Turnpike. So it may be kind of hard to see here, but basically with this interchange configuration here, if you're on K10 or I-70, you can get back and forth between that. But then within the system interchange itself, there's essentially 2 ramps that continue on between Farmers Turnpike and K10 that provide people on Farmers Turnpike to go through the system interchange here to get access to K10. So you would have access between Farmers Turnpike and K10 here, but not between Farmers Turnpike and I-70, which will be provided by the new interchange that you can see out to the west here between I-70 and Lecompton Road, such that if you're on Farmers Turnpike or Lecompton Road, you would have access to I-70 at this location down here. Because you still do have access to K10 via Farmers Turnpike, it's not anticipated that you're going to have the diversion of traffic from Farmers Turnpike to US 40. So with this alternative 2, there are no improvements that are considered as part of alternative 2 to US 40. Next slide. This is alternative 3. Alternative 3 provides a new interchange at K10 and I-70 that provides all access to and from I-70, K10, and Farmers Turnpike at this single interchange. With this alternative, all of the same access that exists today at this location would be provided. That access would be improved by the fact that at-grade intersections for the K10 ramps would be eliminated and free-flowing movements would be provided for all directions. This happens to be some of the feedback that we got during the SEIS in terms of the at-grade intersections that are out there today and some of the safety issues associated with that. And I think one thing that's worthy of note here is that the ability to go from the at-grade intersections at this interchange as it's configured now to the free flow movements is made possible by the fact that the turnpike is converting I-70 turnpike to an all electronic tolling in the future, which means that there will be no more cash collections and therefore no need for the toll booths here and people coming to a stop and then providing the at-grade intersections as they come to the intersection with K10. The intersection with SLT and Farmers Turnpike would remain with this, as you can see to the north of the interchange, but with improvements as needed. And again, because all access is being provided between K10, Farmers Turnpike, and I-70 at this location, there are no improvements along US 40 that are included as part of this alternative because no increase in traffic is expected as a result of anything that we're doing at this interchange. I think with that, I'm going to first transition over to Kyle. He'll take us through what all of this means in terms of the information that we gathered from these alternatives and what led to the preferred alternative that came out of this. And then we'll open it up to any questions that you might have before we move into the next discussion about the corridor at large. So Kyle?
Sure. Well, as Greg mentioned here, that you know, this is just one piece of the corridor that we have been looking at, and again, it's the north end, but it's also a very important piece of the corridor, and we essentially evaluated as its own little or large piece to really understand what this interchange needs to look like and how to proceed from there. So what we do is we took those three options, those three alternatives that Greg mentioned, and evaluated those against the purpose and need criteria, the engineering criteria, as well as the environmental criteria. And what our analysis found was the three alternatives provided very similar traffic operations and congestion relief. However, alternative 3 best met the purpose and need criteria of the project and best satisfied our screening criteria in several other areas. We also noted through, gosh, probably the last 6 months, maybe even longer than that, the preferred access from the public through what we've heard from the advisory groups, from focus groups, through our public meetings and elected official briefings, that our alternative 3 was overwhelmingly preferred as the preferred access. especially having it all at one single location. Some other things to note here, the alternatives 1 and 2 had some pretty major environmental impacts at the Lecompton Road area, including potential impacts to historic properties and to Mead's milkweed, which is a federally threatened species plant, as well as major impacts to farmland. Alternative 3 generally avoided those impacts. And also because alternative 3 is generally contained at a single site, and it's more compact. It had the smallest overall need for the acquisition of additional right-of-way. So again, that's acquiring property from private owners. We tried to avoid that wherever possible, and alternative 3 was definitely came out on top there. A few other things to note. The safety evaluation that we performed also suggested alternative 3 would provide the best safety performance, and this is primarily because it provides direct connections to all movements within the interchange, whereas alternatives 1 and 2 relied upon at-grade intersections in the Lecompton Road interchange, and typically when you have at-grade intersections, there's a higher propensity to have safety issues in those types of situations. The one negative that's been cited for alternative 3 is that it's the highest cost alternative by approximately 20% more than alternative 1, and just a little more than alternative 2. I think it was in the 5 to 10% range. But the balance of all these factors really made alternative 3 the clear choice amongst the screening for both KDOT and federal highways. Greg, I think you mentioned at this point we'd like to stop and ask for any feedback. Is this the stopping point we're looking for?
Yes.
Yep.
Okay, great.
Any questions here? And the mute button should either be at the bottom of your left of your screen or maybe at the top, but you can unmute yourself if you have questions, or feel free to put them in the chat.
Well, hello, everybody. This is Bonnie Lowe with the Chamber, and thank you for the presentation. We're pretty thrilled at the status of it. I had a question about the SEIS report, if it's available now, and I may have missed it, or when it will be available.
I think I can handle that one. It is not available yet. We are still very much in draft form. It needs to be reviewed by Federal Highway Administration, as well as the Corps of Engineers and several other federal agencies, as well as KDOT, before it can be released to the public. In fact, it has to go through a review from the Federal Highway Administration in Washington, D.C. before we can release that, and we're hoping to have that out here to the public much later this fall. I believe late November, in the December timeframe. And at that point in time, we would also be looking to have the public hearing that goes along with the public release of that document. So no, it is not available yet, but will be here in the next several months.
Great, thank you for the update.
Mm-hmm.
All right, well, we'll have another opportunity for questions, so we'll move on to the reasonable alternatives portion, and Greg is going to walk us through these, and then there'll be another break for questions.
Okay, thanks, Robin. So this next overview is going to be of the 3 reasonable alternatives as it relates to the corridor at large. So what we'd like to do is just take you through a summary of what each of these alternatives are, focusing on those things that were differentiators between the alternatives as part of our screening process that Kyle will summarize at the end of this overview. So next slide, Robin. So you can see here the 3 reasonable alternatives. The no action, the build alternative, add capacity freeway, as well as the build alternative, add capacity tolled highway. So what you see here is the no action alternative. This alternative does not assume any improvements to the corridor outside of those that have already been implemented and the continued routine maintenance of the facility by the department. Throughout the process, it was determined that that this alternative does not meet the purpose and need of the project, as it fails to provide any traffic or safety improvements to the corridor, but it is carried forward as it serves as the control for comparison purposes against the other two alternatives. Next slide. Here you see the non-tolled alternative add capacity freeway. This alternative would reconstruct and expand K10 to be a 4-lane freeway. You can visualize this as being similar to the east leg of SLT that was opened in 2016. The improvements would pick up at US 59, Iowa, and the 4-lane freeway would be continued all the way to I-70, where it would connect with a new system interchange that we just discussed at I-70 and K10 intersection. This alternative would also provide incorporation of that interchange into the non-tolled. New grade separated interchanges at Wakarus, which would eliminate the existing intersection and provide new K10 bridges over Wakarus, as well as a new interchange with interchange ramps to provide access to the Wakarus area. And again, that's what's started with the SEIS. After we get this corridor, I'll just mention that Craig Cogan is going to step us through some other alternatives that we're looking at Wakarus right now. But right now, this was the alternative with an offset interchange that would provide that access. Also, this alternative would provide improvements to existing interchanges at US 59 and Clinton Parkway, and maintain the existing interchanges at Bob Billings Parkway and 6th Street. Next slide, Robin. This graphic here, yes, this one here, typical section. This graphic here represents the typical lane configuration of the 4-lane freeway section. Again, it is similar to what you see today on the SLT east leg. You have 2 lanes in each direction with the grass median between eastbound and westbound traffic. The grass median could then be later replaced with a future additional lane in each direction of travel if and when warranted as traffic continues to grow along the corridor. Next slide, Robin. This last alternative is the tolled alternative express toll lane solution. The tolled alternative, similar to the non-tolled, would expand K10 to 4 lanes, 2 lanes in each direction. However, with this alternative, each direction of travel would have 1 tolled lane and 1 non-tolled lane. The purpose of these express toll lanes are to, 1, focus on through traffic and provide a more direct trip for through travelers that do not need to access all local interchanges, provide choice based on traveler preferences. If a traveler wants the less disrupted trip, then they can choose the express toll lane. If a traveler does not want to pay the toll, there is the non-tolled lane available. The goal of this alternative is to provide a reliable, congestion-free trip throughout the day in the express toll lane. This alternative would provide all the same corridor enhancements we discussed with the non-tolled alternative, which includes the new grade separate interchange at Wakarus, incorporation of alternative 3 for the K10 I-70 interchange, improvements to the existing interchanges at US 59 and Clinton Parkway, as well as maintaining existing interchanges at Bob Billings Parkway and 6th Street. Next slide, Robin. So here again, you can see an illustration of how the lanes would be configured for this alternative, the tolled express lane. So the express toll lane is on the inside, as you can see in this typical section, and a non-tolled or general purpose lane is on the outside in each direction. These lanes would be separated from each other by some form of buffer or barrier separation to designate the toll lanes for express travel. whereas the general purpose lanes would provide access to all the interchange ramps in the corridor, thus providing access to the local street network. At various points along the corridor, travelers could choose to enter or exit the express toll lanes into the general purpose lane. This would allow users of the express toll lane to access local interchanges if that was their desire. So if they got in towards the east end and wanted to use the express lanes to get through at a faster clip potentially, but knowing that they have a place where they can get out prior to one of the interchanges, wherever that location might be, then they could do that as well. Again, this alternative, like the non-tolled freeway, provides the ability to expand the corridor into the median in the future if additional traffic lanes are warranted as traffic grows. Next slide. So the non-tolled, and again, as a summary of our analysis of this, the non-tolled and tolled alternatives each yielded similar traffic operations. The environmental impacts and right-of-way impacts were similar between the two build alternatives. Where they differentiated, though, is the non-tolled expressway or the non-tolled freeway is our initial preferred alternative that came out of the study for a few primary reasons. One, we found that our analysis predicted low demand for the express toll lanes, especially in the early years of implementation. Additionally, from the public, we heard concerns with the tolled alternative, particularly with the one general purpose lane and one express toll lane, and the ability to pass slower moving vehicles. Public input was in favor of the non-tolled solution. Also, the express toll lane solution requires additional infrastructure, which results in higher costs than the non-tolled alternative. We found that because of the predicted low utilization of the express toll lane, that the additional costs and required maintenance would not be offset by the revenue generated with the tolled alternative, which led to the decision, as I indicated, that the non-tolled was our preferred alternative moving forward in terms of into the next phase of the SEIS documentation. So with that, next slide, Robin. Yes, so with that, I think before we move into any discussion about the Wakarus interchange alternatives, I would then open it up again to any questions or comments you might have about the three reasonable alternatives and the identification of the non-tolled freeway as the preferred alternative.
Greg, Hugh Carter here with the Chamber. You, in our last advisory committee meeting, you all had explained, and I think others would benefit from hearing a little more about your surveying process, how you went about more specifically determining that the tolled option wouldn't pay for itself. What was that process?
Now, when you say the surveying, expand on that a little bit, Hugh.
I'm sorry. The one option, as far as if we were to explore toll, would have been to go out and do surveys, and rather than a survey, I guess you all came to your own conclusions via just about your methodology to determine what level of usage the toll lane might get and whether or not it would justify.
Yeah,
Right.
and I think I might go ahead, Robin.
Kip's on the phone if you want Kip to answer that as well.
Yeah, I was going to say I might defer to Kip on that one, that I think could speak more specifically to that.
So yeah, when we use, excuse me.
Louder, Kip, louder.
I'm sorry. Is that better?
Yes.
Yeah.
We use the Lawrence Douglas County travel model to help us identify how much traffic would utilize the express toll lane. And so that travel demand model, assigns traffic with a toll associated with it. And then we take that traffic demand and, apply a toll rate so we can figure out how much revenue is generated each year and compare that to the costs of building and operating the system. So that's how we can analyze, it's called a traffic and revenue assessment. And so that's how we analyze the feasibility of the express lane. Did that answer your question, Hugh?
Yeah, it did. So that technique makes some assumptions based on traffic versus actually surveying folks as to, you know, who would pay a toll, right?
Right, right. So if that had passed, you know, that's kind of a sketch level planning, we call that. If that had passed and said, yes, this is worthy of more study, then you would go on and do a preference survey where you talk to a wide number of people to get an understanding of their willingness to pay a toll, how much would they be willing to pay. And so you go into more detail, but it didn't pan out past this first sketch level planning phase. Yeah.
Great. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Any other questions?
There is a question, Robin, in the chat box. Can you speak a bit more about the intersections and how they will change, the interchanges along the corridor, Greg?
Okay, I'm looking. So, can you speak a bit more about how the intersections at 15th, so that's Bob Billings, I assume, Clinton Parkway and 6th Street will change? I believe I might defer to Craig on that to kind of speak to the details a little bit more in terms of specific improvements at those locations. So, Craig?
Yeah, absolutely. So the improvement concepts contemplated with the identified preferred alternative at 6th Street. The KDOT actually has another project coordinated with this one, but on a separate timeline that considers improving that interchange to a diverging diamond. And so our analysis and screening here assumes that improvement is implemented there, but the access from K10 would be very similar to what it is today. At Bob Billings, the assumption in the NonTold Alternative is that the interchange that is constructed out there today and in operation would remain and just be connected to the new 4-lane highway. And then at Clinton Parkway, all alternatives really contemplate a realignment of K10 to the Clinton Parkway area to improve the design speed of the horizontal curve that goes through that area today. And as a result of that realignment of K10, it's necessary to do some reconfiguration of that Clinton Parkway interchange. And so we're anticipating that it would be reconfigured into a partial folded diamond. So 3 diamond style ramps similar to what's out there today, and then a loop ramp for the Clinton Parkway to eastbound K10 traffic. And right now the intersection control that is being carried forward for those at that interchange would be roundabout intersections. So hopefully I addressed that question.
I know you're going to talk about Wakarus next, but then Iowa, you might mention what's going to happen at Iowa.
Yeah, thanks, Kip. Good point. Yeah, we'll cover Wakarus in a little bit more detail in a few minutes here. The Iowa US 59 interchange would have a slight reconfiguration associated with it. Folks may be aware of some considered or planned development in the southeast quadrant of that interchange. And as a result of ongoing discussions about that development, a little bit of reconfiguration of the eastbound ramps is considered. So instead of a full diamond interchange like you see out there today, a loop ramp would be implemented for the eastbound entrance onto K10. So traffic going from Iowa to eastbound K10 would utilize a loop ramp instead of the diamond ramp that's out there today. And that just helps align those ramps with the entrance to a future development there.
And then
oh, go ahead, Kip.
somebody asked about what a diverging diamond looks like.
Might require a picture. I don't know if I.
Yeah, I was going to suggest, like, if they're familiar with 95th and I-35 in Lenexa, or Row and I-435 and Bueller, if you were familiar with either one of those locations.
We can provide a graphic of what that looks like after the meeting. There's been several built around Kansas City lately at different locations, and it's sort of where the traffic crosses over and you have good left turning movements. So we'll provide a graphic out with Hugh that Hugh can provide to you about that to give you a better visual of that.
And yeah, I do have one pulled up on my screen, Robin. If I can show,
yeah,
I don't know
here.
if I can share.
I'll stop sharing and you can pop that up.
Yeah, to just try and, or at least briefly address the question, and we can provide more information if necessary. So I hope what you see on your screen here is an aerial photograph. This is the I-435 and Row interchange in Overland Park. And so the core concept of a diverging diamond interchange is that as the traffic on the city street approaches the interchange ramps, the directions of travel actually cross over to the opposite side of the road that is typical. So in this case, the left to right traffic here crosses over to the left side of the road through the interchange and then crosses back on the other side of the interchange. And what that does is it facilitates some simpler signal phasing, actually eliminating some phases of the signal and allowing free flow access for left turning traffic onto the ramps. And what KDOT has found at several locations across the state is that the diverging diamond actually offers quite a bit of improvement in traffic operations over just a traditional diamond, and that travelers see a lot less delay in their trips when these interchanges are implemented in the right circumstances. And so a very similar configuration is what is considered for future improvement at 6th Street and K10.
And this is Steve Ballman, the area engineer. What you're seeing on the screen is a very large, very high capacity version of this type of diverging diamond. The diverging diamond planned for or partially planned for K10 and US 40 or 6th Street is a much more compact version of this. It's utilizing the existing bridge. We're not adding to the bridge width at all, but just to clarify, because the concept is the same, the execution will be much more compact.
Yep. Yep.
And then maybe while we're switching back to the presentation, this is a good question for Brian or Chris. Somebody had a question about will the non-toll road slow the building process? I think that's a KDOT question.
We can tag team that. This is Chris.
You're the money man now.
No, I can't say. Another KDOTer might provide input here. I will say the non-tolled option is in the development pipeline. That is it was one of the IKE program development pipeline projects along with the DDI at 6th Street. It's in the pipeline being designed. So we will continue to design that. And whether I don't know. I just know that the tolled option just did not perform very well in regard to generating money, for one thing, to pay off the bonds. I can't say whether it would or wouldn't. I just know that the non-tolled option is in the pipeline, and with it not being tolled, it being whatever we build will not be tolled, so it will be, you know, highway funds. We are looking at ways, if all of the funding is not available for, you know, $200 million at once, looking at ways to implement phases or pieces of the project to be built, such as a new interchange at Wakarus and K10 to get rid of the signal. So I can't definitively answer the question. So I don't know, but I'm hopeful, and I know that this 2-lane highway is high on the list of needs, and that, you know, KDOT executive staff, it's high on their list as well, but I can't answer your question.
Hey, Chris, this is Greg. I might just maybe add on to what you said, because, and I don't want to put words in Matt's mouth, but I think the inference is the non-tolled going to make it go slower than what the tolled would? And I think what the evaluation has shown is that there's just not enough traffic generated with the tolled alternative to generate the revenue that would make it go any faster based on it generating revenue. So I think that's maybe one way I would characterize it as well.
Yeah, that's a much
better,
better answer, Greg. Thank you.
Yeah, this is Kelly Coltola, Public Affairs Manager for District 1. And this project is one of the more important projects under the new Ike Transportation Plan. And I think that there will be a priority to try and make this project happen. It may not happen all at once. It may happen in phases over a period of time. But the traffic analysis and tolling analysis showed that the amount of revenue that would come in would take decades and decades to pay for itself. So it just wasn't conducive to being very practical.
Okay, I know we're going to have a lot of questions about that Wakarusa intersection. So if you're ready to roll into that, that'd be great.
Yeah, I think to be sensitive to everyone's time here, we should probably move on to the next things here, and we'll try to get through that quickly. I know the Wakarus interchange is one that's of high interest to a lot of folks, given the traffic operations and safety issues that are experienced out there today. So what you see on your screen here is the alternative for the Wakarus interchange that had been carried through the majority of the SEIS process. And that's the concept that emerged from the 2017 concept study. However, as KDOT and the team here has gone through the SEIS process, we've heard quite a bit of public feedback and stakeholder feedback about this interchange, and some concern about the out of direction travel that is required with this concept. You can see the long connector road from Wakarusa over to this offset diamond interchange, which is about a mile of travel to the location where the access to and from K10 would be provided. And so as a result of that feedback, KDOT has endeavored to investigate some other options for these alternatives, and I'll kind of walk you through each one of those here after maybe let me just say a few things about this one that may be non-obvious in terms of how it works, and then I'll talk to you about the other interchange alternatives that are under consideration. So with this option, a new interchange would be built, like I said, about a mile off to the east. And Wakarusa extension there would pass over K10 with a new bridge, and there'd be 4 new diamond ramps that provide access to and from K10. And then that Wakarus extension road would carry traffic up to and connect back into existing Wakarus. And then at the location where the existing intersection at K10 and Wakarus is, there would be new K10 bridges built that carry K10 traffic over Wakarusa. And like I say, this interchange was originally emerged as the preferred because it minimized impacts to existing right-of-way and helps minimize some of the floodplain impacts to the West Branch Yankee Tank that kind of snakes its way through the area here. But we did hear that concern about out of direction travel, and so we've been considering 2 other alternatives. Robin, if you want to go to the next slide. So the first of those alternatives is a folded diamond. And what this folded diamond provides is access directly to Wakarusa from K10. So if I work through the westbound direction here, westbound access would be provided by a loop ramp and a new directional ramp here. Actually, I was actually talking about the other side, but it's the same configuration, Robin, in terms of what you're tracing with your cursor there. And a new intersection would be built with Wakarusa. And then on the eastbound side, very similar, a new loop ramp and directional ramp would connect to a new at-grade intersection on Wakarus. And then as we discussed with the last alternative, K10 would cross over Wakarus with a new set of bridges and remove that at-grade intersection that's out there today. This option provides a little bit more conventional access than the last one and connects directly to Wakarus. There are some considerations with, there's some environmentally sensitive areas here, particularly on the north side of K10 that would be impacted with this option.
Robin,
and it adds an additional intersection along K10 as well, or along Wakarus as well. The next alternative that is under consideration attempts to minimize some of those impacts to environmentally sensitive areas. And the way that this alternative does that is by changing the style of ramps for the westbound direction. So the ramps for the eastbound are the same as what we just discussed with the last alternative, but these westbound ramps are actually configured in more of a diamond style. And so the westbound exit would come down and connect with an intersection at 27th Street and have a connection then on up to Wakarus. And then a westbound entrance ramp would connect at a new intersection with Wakarus. So there is this configuration is a little less traditional than the last one that we looked at, but in that it has kind of a split diamond configuration here for the westbound exit. But it does eliminate the impacts to some of those environmentally sensitive areas and reduces the necessary right-of-way acquisition for this alternative. So KDOT in this is working with the city and county right now and is still in the process of evaluating these 3 alternatives that I just quickly stepped you through there. And the goal is for that team to arrive at a preferred alternative here in the very near future. And that preferred alternative would be incorporated into the SEIS and presented to the public at the public hearing that we discussed earlier in that draft release of the SEIS. So that's a little bit about the ultimate improvements that are being considered here, but KDOT also recognizes the importance of this location and has been endeavoring to incorporate some interim safety improvements to this area to make some more immediate impacts. And I think maybe Steve Ballman is prepared to just give us a quick summary of what's been going on there.
Hello, everyone. I'm Steve Ballman. I'm the area engineer that covers this part of District 1. Lawrence, Topeka, Emporia areas are my purview. Here, about a year and a half ago, we went ahead and after review of some safety feedback from our traffic engineering folks, we went ahead and decided to go ahead and do some improvements through the existing K-10 corridor to address some of the safety concerns that we were all hearing, not only from the public, but also recognizing in some reviews. First improvement is that up at the K10 I-70 interchange, we went ahead and, because of some feedback, installed a light pole at the K10 Farmers Turnpike T intersection because we've been having some evening blow-through type accidents. We also improved signing up there and added rumble strips and lowered the speed limit. Those changes were made by a combination of Douglas County and KDOT last year. At K10 and 27th Street / Wakarus, we went ahead and, on the recommendations from the consultant, went ahead and made some slight modifications to the signal there, and then also started the planning process of installing a temporary queue detection warning system. It's something that you saw from last winter up through this spring that was in place, that was operating. Unfortunately, we had to shut that system down due to vandalism when COVID-19 hit. It is being replaced by another project that we let this year to go ahead and put up a permanent system, a permanent queue detection warning system for the 27th Street intersection. That project is in process. We're still having the contractor acquire the equipment and the structures that are needed to put that in. Hasn't started yet. It should be operational sometime this winter. Another modification we made was to go ahead and also, under that same study, is they recommended some modifications to the actual intersection. And if, Robin, if you could move to the next slide. I think everybody's familiar with this. We've went ahead and started doing a project to modify 27th Street, Wakarus, and K10 to improve capacity, throughput capacity from the side streets, in an effort to also improve green time on K10. This project, if you've been through the area, it's about 80% complete. It's blocked off one of the movements from 27th Street to K10, but it was kind of a necessary evil to improve the throughput capacity and improve overall safety for this intersection. As again, we're about 80% complete, should be finished in the next month or so. Along with this, and it's not entirely related, we're also doing an overlay on K10, and the two were tied together. So both projects are at about 80%. Any questions from the crowd regarding the near-term modifications we made?
Steve, there was one question not related to the interim improvements, but the pedestrian access at Wakarus. So Craig, could you touch on how pedestrian access will be addressed in any of those options?
Yeah, sorry, I neglected to get back to that. So all of the options will seek to improve the pedestrian access from the north side of K10 into the park primarily and into the trail system. So with the new grade separation that's considered where K10 goes over Wakarus, all would have pedestrian access that runs along Wakarus, connects through the various intersections that are required for each and into the park there, but avoiding any conflicts with K10 traffic. So the exact details of how that happens will get refined as the design goes along here in the future, but definitely a priority to remove that conflict with the K10 through traffic.
Great, thanks. We've got about 2 minutes left. Other questions on the Wakarus interchange that you want to cover, that anybody has, that we want to make sure we get those addressed, because the public stuff is, I can go through that pretty quick. Timetable, yeah, that's a good question. Chris Norton or Brian, do you have a question, a response about like when do we think construction will be going on this?
Well, we'll tag team this again. We don't know, but we know that it is in the design pipeline. So, for example, we expect the SEIS to be complete and approved by FHWA sometime early in 2021, and HNTB can correct me. So that's a big deal. And we've already began preliminary design. So what we would do then is next summer of 2021, finish that design about 50%, where we can have what we call our field check meeting with the local area and even local units. Well, we would have field check where we could then proceed to develop our right-of-way plans and begin the right-of-way process by summer of 2021, fall of 2021, where we would do, appraisal work. Those parcels or tracts would be identified. We would begin appraisal work, contacting property owners. So this is a big job. So we look at right-of-way up at the North Junction and along here, probably taking up to 2 years from appraisal work to getting property cleared. So that gets you into the fall of 23. Would need some time then to allow for utility relocations once we have the right-of-way acquired, for utility companies to be able to probably move outside of KDOT right-of-way on easements, since it's a fully access controlled facility. So if things work perfectly and this job would get funded completely or even in pieces, you're looking at potentially at possibly an early 2024 letting on all of it or pieces of it, if it's funded for construction. Greg or Craig, does anybody, or Kelly or Steve Ballman, does that sound realistic if it does get funded in pieces or in whole?
This is Steve, and just based on what I know of the utilities through this thing and the right-of-way, it would be a little bit more realistic to say the earliest we could see something is probably more like 2025. There's a lot of relocation of some fairly hefty facilities on the utility side. So this is just a prediction. This is not actually a scheduled thing.
It's good to be conservative, maybe, with expectations.
Yeah.
And I'd also add, if this corridor does end up being broken out into separate phases, this Wakarus interchange is probably the top priority to be done first of any sections of K10.
Okay.
And there's one, Hugh, we are just going to thank everybody for participating. And is there anything else that you'd like to add?
Thank you, Robin. I do see there's another question, and if we can maybe get to that one offline so you can wrap up. Were you talking to your presenters for anything else to add?
I think that was about it. I do want to say thank you for the Chamber for this opportunity, and the Chamber's been involved in this project on our advisory group since the beginning, so they're participating and working to keep everybody informed. We've got a couple of other public opportunities coming up, and so we hope that as you all get that information, you will help share that out with folks to get your employees and constituents and friends and family involved in this so that they can provide their feedback. You know, we had good feedback on the virtual meetings, but we need to keep broadening our reach and have people have the opportunity to provide comments on the environmental document when it's ready to review and at the public hearing, which will probably be a virtual opportunity as well as an in-person opportunity, but we really are going to push people for the virtual opportunity to keep everybody safe. So that kind of summarizes that. And thank you all again for your time and participation, and we're a little bit over, but we will get back to Larry on the question about the county and the extension of Wakarus.
Fantastic. Robin, Brian, and team, thank you so much for your time. And folks, please pass this on once I get it out to you, a recording of this call to anybody that might be interested. Thanks, everybody. Have a great day.